What is going on, guys? A little bit of a different live stream we've got going here for week 18 because of a lot of the teams resting, just overall, a lot of question marks behind every team. Going to be a different type of breakdown. We're going to go team by team, talking about who I expect to play, who I expect to rest, and of course, who the best DraftKings targets for today are going to be. So go ahead, strap on in. This isn't going to be the longest live stream ever. I really just want to make sure we get to every game script because with a lot of the backups playing today, it is going to be a little bit of a crapshoot. So at least for me, I'm playing a little bit lower stakes this week as a result because it's going to be a little bit more unpredictable than weeks past. So we're going to start off with the Green Bay versus the Detroit game. This game is expected to be one of the games that doesn't matter all that much. First and foremost, the Green Bay Packers have said that they're going to start their starters, try and at least keep them in rhythm, but they have not said how much they're going to play. If I had to guess, guys like an Aaron Rodgers, a David Bakhtiari, who will be returning this week from injury, are going to play maybe a series or two. Same thing with Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, all those sort of guys. Aaron Jones might actually not even suit up. We're going to have to see whether he's activated for today or not. Either way, though, not really looking at Green Bay, maybe asides for A.J. Dillon. So I want to talk a little bit about Dillon. If Aaron Jones is rolled out, he will serve as the number one running back, but I do expect him to at least get 10, maybe 15 carries today. He is $6,200. There are certainly better games for us to try and target today, but at the very least, wanted to throw his name out there because if anybody on that team is going to go off today, it is going to be A.J. Dillon. Moving on to the Lions now. Over the Lions, a lot more to look at, right? This is a team that, even though they are well without of the playoffs, don't really have anybody they need to necessarily protect. They do expect Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Swift, all those guys to get all of their playing time today. So I will be looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's a little bit more expensive than we'd hope to, but he's one of the few guys that has been an absolute monster towards the end of this year and at least has a little bit of incentive to go out there and have a big day. If we take a look at some of the stats that he has for the year, he's creeping up on 1,000 receiving yards. He's creeping up on double-digit touchdowns, that kind of thing. He really needs to go out there and assert himself, right? He's been the best wide receiver in the NFL as a rookie for the last end of the year, and I do expect him to have a solid end of the year here. Someone else that we could possibly take a look at would be Brock Wright. He's only $2,500 for the Lions. Somebody who, again, he's going to be seeing playing time due to the injuries that they've had on that roster, and Detroit really doesn't have anything to lose here. Moving on to the second game of the docket, now we're going to be taking a look at Indianapolis versus Jacksonville, which, as a Steeler fan, I am the biggest Jacksonville Jaguars fan ever today. I'm going to be watching that game on my second TV over here because if Jacksonville somehow takes out the Colts and the Steelers win today, we're into the playoffs. That is assuming that tonight's game is not a tie, and I guess I'll go ahead and mention this now. If the Jacksonville Jaguars win and then the Steelers win, the Chargers and the Raiders have the biggest incentive in the world to go out there and tie. Because even if they win, it's some weird thing where only one of them would get in, where if they tie, both teams would get into the playoffs. I do not like the sound of that. Teams that would purposefully forfeit their game could make for a real shit show if that kind of thing were to happen. But let's hope the teams do the right thing. They play hard tonight if that were to happen. But this Colts team in a great spot, right? As much as I hope that the Jaguars would come out here and win this game, the Colts clearly need to win this game. They win and they're into the playoffs. So guys like Jonathan Taylor, he's $9,300 this week, are going to be excellent plays. You're looking at right around 4x value in terms of a projection. I have him at a 29.5 point fantasy point projection. I mean, they're not going to be shy about using them this week. They can't take any chances at all. And on the other side of things, if we move over to the Jacksonville Jaguars, they have nothing to lose. I mean, they're going to be going out there throwing the ball downfield. Trevor Lawrence likely trying to throw for over 300 yards here. It's not like this Jaguars team has been completely atrocious this year. I mean, there's been certain weeks where they've looked like a peewee squad, but they also beat the Buffalo Bills. So it's at least within their range of outcomes to come out and have a solid game. At least for me, there's not that many people in the Jaguars I'd want to prioritize. You could go to Trevor Lawrence if you're looking for a punt play at quarterback. He's only $5,100. You could go to a few of the wide receivers like a Marvin Jones. He hasn't been as productive as I think a lot of people expected here in 2022. Perhaps could have a good day at just $4,300. If there's anyone else I was going to take a shot on down low, Laviska Shenault Jr., he's only $3,700 this week, which is one of the best price tags we've got on him all year. And even though he hasn't had the best end to the year, he hasn't eclipsed the 10-point mark since week 6. So in fact, he's had a really bad end of the year. He's getting touches out of the backfield as a running back. He's getting plenty of screenplay set up for him because he is so shifty and has such a high yards after catch rate. Could always have that home run play and completely break his price tag. So is somebody I'll be willing to take a few shots on, albeit in only about 5 to 10% of my lineups. A couple guys on the Colts you could go to as well, aside from a Jonathan Taylor. Michael Pittman Jr. should see plenty of targets this week. Same thing with a T.Y. Hilton. And if you wanted to take a pure punt play on somebody like the Colts, going to a Zach Pascal or an Ashton Dulin could be people to look at. Let's move on to the Washington at New York Giants game. Truly nothing to play for here, right? Washington out of the playoffs, same thing with the Giants. In these type of games where you're dealing with middle of the road teams that don't really have anything to gain, these are the type of circumstances I'm trying to avoid. Sure, you might have one guy in this game go off for a good amount of fantasy points, but we're looking at one of the lowest totals of the entire slate. Both of these offenses have struggled mightily, especially towards the end of the year. So if you're going to take a shot on anyone, I'd say a wide receiver in this game, right? Maybe a Terry McLaurin, even though I don't expect him to play the entire game, goes out there, gets you a real long touchdown. Or on the Giants side, right, we can take a look at some of these wide receivers because they have so many injuries at that position. Kenny Golladay perhaps goes out and has a real solid day. It's not something that's happened for quite some time. In fact, Kenny Golladay has not eclipsed 10 fantasy points since week 4. That's where he ended up scoring 20 fantasy points. He's been dealing with injuries for a good amount of the year. He's had different quarterbacks cycling through that team. But when we're on such a nasty slate like we have today, where we have teams that aren't even going to be playing their starters, guys like Golladay are worth a few more looks, right? He's an NFL caliber player. We know that he's shown in the past that he's capable of putting up fantasy production. And even in that really ugly squad would be those type of players that I'm taking a look at. A game that's a little bit more intriguing is the Chicago versus the Vikings game. Even though both teams, again, don't have much to play for, on the Vikings side, you've already heard that, first off, it's likely to be Mark Zimmer's last game as their head coach. You've also heard that the defense, a lot of the starters will be out there, which was a huge surprise when I saw that. Really, there's just nothing to gain on either side of this game. In fact, if they lose, they'll be getting a better draft pick. So again, really low over-under here, right? The over-under in this game is just 44 points. It is the 4th lowest over-under on the entire slate. A few guys I'd be willing to take some shots on. First and foremost, David Montgomery. My only issue here is the play time, right? He projects out very well at $6,800. Doesn't have anyone to really run the ball behind him. Khalil Herbert has been completely taken out of his offense. Has yet to get over 6 touches in a game since week 7 when he was the starter for this team. So he's being mixed in as, when David Montgomery gets tired, they're putting in Herbert for a play or two just to give him his breath, and then he's getting right back out there. Nick Foles, he's not going to be a quarterback for this team, at least not projected for right now. I believe that is going to be fucking Andy Dalton. Yeah, that should pretty much tell you everything you need to know about this team. Andy Dalton as their quarterback, they're very likely to be leaning on the running attack today rather than the passing attack. And that's why we're getting such a strong projection on somebody like a David Montgomery. As of right now, I have Montgomery projected for 23 touches between rushes and receptions, which makes him a great play on this slate. A few other people we could talk about. We go over to the Viking side of things. Again, we have no idea the type of usage to expect from this offense because they have nothing to play for. We have heard that the defense will be out there, but we have not gotten confirmation for the offense. If they end up sitting Dalvin Cook, Alexander Mattison would become one of the best plays on the slate. A couple other people you could take a look at. I don't expect Justin Jefferson to get all that many snaps today either. So going to somebody like a KJ Osborne, potentially even a D.D. Westbrook, that are some of those tertiary options on this team, might be a good idea today because they still are the favorites over this Bears team, and they're at least going to put up some points, right? That's what we expect from that type of line. Let's move on to the next game here. Now we have the Titans at the Texans, which is also a game where one team has something to play for, the other team doesn't. But at the same time, the Houston Texans don't have all that much to lose. So you might see a few starters playing for the Texans, but not anybody I'm trying to prioritize. For the Titans, they have a ton to play for. The only issue here is that they're not a very concentrated offense. It seems like every single week you're relying on a different player, whether it was A.J. Brown in that primetime comeback in the second half, or of course the rushing game, which has been the case 3 of the last 4 weeks. The issue is with the rushing game, they are utilizing 3 different running backs. Now, granted, Hilliard and Foreman are getting a little bit more touches than somebody like a McNichols, but sorry, someone's knocking on my door. I'll be right back, guys. Yes. Good. Yes. Okay. Yes. Cool. Can I do that here in attendance? I'm going to do a live stream. Cool. Yeah, do that tomorrow. Sounds good. Yeah. Yeah, no one uses the guest station. Cool. Thank you so much. You too. I apologize. My neighbor had something to ask for me, so wanted to make sure I could get to him there. Let's talk about the Titans a little bit here, though. That threw me a little bit off. First and foremost, though, like I said, it's hard to tell who's going to be the major contributor for this offense. This is an offense that kind of has somebody lead them week in and week out. So as a result, even though they do have a lot of incentive today, probably not going to be a huge priority, right? If you want to go ahead and take one of those cheap running backs for the Titans, couldn't blame you for going out and doing so, but just a little bit less predictable than some of the other situations we have on the slate. Talking about the Texans, because there's not a whole lot to like over there. You can go to Davis Mills if you wanted to take a complete flyer, but I do not expect this offense to have a ton of traction today. Brevin Jordan is extremely cheap at tight end. You could take a chance there. Rex Burkhead has been solid towards the end of this year as well, but at the same time, they're in a negative game script against a team that has to win to hold their position for the playoff seeding. So for me, the Texans, not a huge priority, if at all, to be quite honest with you. No worries, man. Yeah, that I see them every once in a while, but yeah, they want me to move my car, so I'm gonna do that after the stream. But yeah, let's talk about the Steelers versus the Baltimore Ravens, which, in my opinion, is probably going to be the best fantasy target on the slate. You have two teams that have a lot to play for, two teams that hate each other, and two defenses that are decimated by injury. So we have a 41-point over-under right here. I do not agree with that. I do expect this to be a little bit of a shootout, even with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. Huntley looked great, aside from last week, we'll say. Did not look that good his last time out, but his first start for that Ravens team scored over 20 fantasy points. They were moving the ball through the air on the ground. So overall, really do expect this to be a game to target. I mean, first and foremost, for the Steelers, Najee Harris makes a lot of sense here. He's got a ton of targets last week, tons of rushes. Deonte Johnson is back from COVID. He's only out for 1 day, which had to have been a false positive or something like that. Or the guy has the best immune system in human history, whatever it's the case. So I like Deonte Johnson. I like going to Najee Harris. Ben Roethlisberger, you can take a few shots on him if you're in a large field GPP. As of right now, I have rated around 20% Ben Roethlisberger. But really do like this offense. They have a lot to play for. On the other side of things with the Ravens, Tyler Huntley might be my favorite play on the slate. So in terms of points per dollar, it's projecting for nearly 4x value in terms of your return, which obviously we're looking for a little bit higher upside than that. 5, 6x is what we're looking for at the quarterback position for taking a value target. Some other guys you could, mix in with a Tyler Huntley. You can go to a Mark Andrews. He's been absolutely lighting it up towards the end of this year. Marquise Brown as well. I think they're definitely being underutilized just because a lot of these guys are a little bit overpriced, right? We usually see them a little bit cheaper. Most notably, somebody like a Mark Andrews, he's $7,500, right? So that's why we're getting middling ownership on him. But this is by far the highest. They have the most motivation in this game, right? So on the other side here, there's a lot to play for. There's going to be no doubts that a team's going to give up here. So really like targeting either side of that game. And if you're going to do any type of a game stack today, it might be one of the only games you can truly do a game stack for. I mean, obviously that Sunday night football game is a play-in game, but that's not on the main slate. If we take a look at some of the other games here, I'm hard pressed to find a game that really both sides have a lot of incentive. The only game that comes a close second would be the Rams and the 49ers. But the 49ers have significantly more incentive to go out there and win that game than the Rams do. The Rams are already guaranteed to be in the playoffs. They don't really have to worry about all that much, whereas the 49ers need to win and they need a loss to get in. So that just to give you an idea, that's why I like that Steelers-Ravens game so much. Not just a Steeler fan, a lot of people say that, like, oh, you're just a homer, blah, 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 blah. It's also the only game where both teams actually need to win. So that's why it's going to be such a good fantasy target for today. And Scott says Deonte is going to get a ton of targets. Yeah, I agree, man. He sees 12 plus targets almost every single week, especially with Ben's arm strength. He's somebody who can't really move the ball downfield like he used to by any means. So as a result, just gets a ton of targets to some of those shorter wide receivers. Particularly with Juju Smith-Schuster out for the year. He used to soak up a lot of those little screen routes, routes over the middle, that kind of thing. Now it's just Deonte Johnson. So that's why we've seen him have such a high floor. Just to give you guys an idea, since week 1 of the NFL season, he has scored below 10 points just once, and that was in week 15, where he scored 9.8 points and was injured. So that should tell you everything you need to know about Deonte Johnson, one of the most consistent players in all of fantasy football. Also gives you relatively high upside as well. He scored 33 fantasy points in the game this year, 26 fantasy points, 21 fantasy points, 24, 22, 19. You get the point. The guy's capable of putting up his ceiling, and he's only $7,600 this week, which for a slate this sloppy is definitely a good target there. So definitely agree with you, man. Let's talk about the rest of these games, and we're going to have very little motivation to talk about here. So first off, this Bengals versus Browns game pretty much means nothing. Both sides are out of, at least not going to see movement in their seeding. If there's going to be any type of motivation here at all, it's going to be for the Bengals, though. I believe if they win and they get a loss from the Titans, they might move to the number 2 seed, but they'd still be hosting a home game in Wild Card Weekend and wouldn't make all that much difference going forward. So for this Bengals team, as of right now, I don't have exposure to anybody. If I was going to take a shot at anyone, Chris Evans is likely to play a lot of running back for the Bengals, especially when they rest a lot of their starters. So going to somebody there might make a lot of sense. On the Browns, oh, my mic is way over here. Hopefully you guys could hear me. Oh, my Lord. Didn't notice that. My mic was like way off to the side, but I was talking pretty loud. Hopefully you guys can hear me there. It usually picks up that kind of sound. But over on the Brown side of things, the defense is actually my most owned player for that team because the Bengals are likely to go to a lot of their backup unit. Chris Evans, go into some of those backup wide receivers. If they put Joe Burrow out there, which has Joe Burrow already been rolled out? I really hope for his own sake that he has been. Let's go ahead and check. Yeah, he's been rolled out. He doesn't need to be out there at all. He shouldn't be out there at all. For the Cleveland Browns, we have Case Keenum at quarterback. It actually makes them slightly more intriguing than when they had Baker Mayfield out there. Just to give you guys an idea of why I like Case Keenum so much, he throws the ball down the field. He's a strong arm. He's not afraid of throwing the ball 30, 40 yards downfield, whereas Baker Mayfield throws ducks. He is the arm of Peyton Manning when he was 42 years old. I used to be a huge Baker guy, but at this point, he's indefensible, probably one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Case Keenum would actually be an upgrade for them. So in terms of a lot of their production, not really holding them back, not really trying to limit some of these wide receivers. If anybody for the Browns is going to get benched and not see all of their run, it's likely going to be a Jarvis Landry, right? One of those older veteran type of wide receivers. Whereas guys like a Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Njoku, Rashard Higgins, Anthony Schwartz, Demetric Felton, all those type of players that are young, don't really have anything to lose, they could see a lot of usage today. And this is a divisional matchup. The Browns have kind of been embarrassed these last 2 to 3 weeks. I would not be surprised if they came out here and tried to shit on the Bengals. I mean, at this point, they are favorites, which I agree with, but I could see them winning this game by 2-3 touchdowns. They're not a bad team, especially with Keenum at quarterback. Daniel says, hey, man, which wide receiver are you benching between JJ, AJ Brown, Deontay, or Cooks? So I'm assuming that is for season-long fantasy. So let's go ahead and take this out. JJ, assuming you mean Justin Jefferson. He might not see the most playing time today, so that would be a prime candidate there. AJ Brown, the Titans, we know they need to win this game. They have at least a little bit to play for. I wouldn't be benching him. I surely wouldn't be benching Deonte Johnson. We just talked about his consistency there. So it's really between Justin Jefferson and Brandon Cooks. And it's for the, it's for the chip today. I got you. That's a tough one, right? So it's either going to be Justin Jefferson or Cooks that you want to bench. Cooks doesn't have all that much to play for, but he also doesn't have anything to lose. So he's likely to play at least half of the snaps today. Justin Jefferson. Let me do a deep dive on Jefferson because there was supposed to be some type of sentiment put out by their beat reporters about how much he would play, and we didn't get that before the stream went live. Let me see if it's gone live since we've been on air here, because if he's going to play, you for sure got to play Justin Jefferson, right? Particularly if he's going to be out there for the whole game. But if he's not, Brandon Cooks would probably be the guy. So give me 1 second here, guys. All right, so it's looking like he's going to play, and I don't like to look into this too much, but he tweeted today that he's going for the receiving yards record. So I'd be playing Justin Jefferson. I'd be benching Cooks out of that set of 4 wide receivers there. I wasn't super sold on Justin Jefferson, but if he's really set on trying to go out and get that receiving yards record, maybe he goes out and does it. All right. And that's for your first 2 years. That's the Randy Moss record that I'm talking about, where the first 2 years, most wide receiver yards. He can pass Randy Moss today, which would kind of be pretty nuts. And he was a Viking as well. So just a lot of parallels there between those two players. All right, let's talk about this Panthers versus Tampa Bay game. This is also a game where essentially nothing to play for on each side. I do expect to see Tom Brady for at least half the game, especially if they go out there and get a big lead. It's probably going to be pulled at halftime. Not really anybody I'm trying to target, though, because if we're talking about a 50% snap share for the starters and then the guys on the bench are coming in, it's not very likely for somebody to hit their ceiling in that type of performance. If we're going to take a look at anybody on the Panthers, they just announced that their head coach is coming back. So RIP to all of you Panthers fans out there. That's not a good thing. Coach Rule is one of the worst in the entire NFL. Yeah, you guys probably should have cut him. Just saying. But DJ Moore here, he's a decent option. He's $5,800. He's somebody who has really high upside. I don't see a reason to be benching DJ Moore today. Same thing with Sam Darnold. He's going to be the starting quarterback. I do not expect him to be rested today. He's going to play all 4 quarters. So if you're going to take a shot on one of these teams with absolutely no motivation, go ahead and take it on a team like the Panthers, where you have some of these high upside plays. They're all coming in at sub 4% ownership. The only guy getting over 4% ownership on this team, and most of them are below 2%, is DJ Moore at 9.6% ownership, which is actually a lot lower than we'd expect him to come in because he's at that $5,800 price tag. This guy's usually in that mid 6K range. That's actually quite a bit of value there. For the Buccaneers, I have no ownership on this team to this point. They're also relatively low owned. If you're going to take a shot at anyone, Keyshawn Vaughn is likely to play the starting running back role for this team. I could see myself going there. He's relatively cheap at $5,300. They are also 9-point favorites, which is extremely notable, which is definitely surprising to me given the fact that I don't expect them to play their starters the entire game. Taking a look across the industry right now, a lot of the larger websites have Tom Brady projected playing the entire game, which I vehemently disagree with. They have, I believe they can go from the number 3 to the number 2 seed. Maybe they could drop down to the number 4 seed with a loss at the very most. But that's not enough to risk Tom Brady for an entire game. I'm fairly certain that they're all right taking the number 3 seed and that kind of thing because they're not getting a bye either way. So for me, Tom Brady, not going to be a priority. Right now, he's actually coming in with 3.7% ownership, which is higher than I would have expected it to be, which only further makes him a fade. The other people we could consider is Cyril Grayson. He's been a little bit of a breakout candidate for this team. He certainly fills that Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown type role where he's a smaller type of wide receiver, a little bit more shifty, more comfortable over the middle than he is on the outside. So because of those two guys down, he could see some targets, even if Tom Brady ends up seeing the bench. They're not going to bench Cyril Grayson, right? He's been like the number 3-4 wide receiver at the very most for the entire year, if even active. So you can look his way if you're going to go to anyone on the Bucs. And Keyshawn Vaughn, which we've already talked about here a little bit. Now, moving on to the Patriots versus Miami game. My family is actually at the game right now, so have fun at the game. Yeah, they're a huge. My mom's a Steelers fan, as I am, but my stepdad is a huge Patriots fan. So yeah, they're actually down at the game. I do expect this to be relatively competitive, right? The Dolphins are out of the playoff race now, so they don't really have anything to play for, but Patriots need to win to take out the Bills. And to be honest with you, because this Dolphins team is as young as it is, they're probably going to play most of the game, right? And it's a little bit of speculation, much like yesterday. A lot of people thought the Cowboys weren't going to play the entire game, and for some reason, Mike McCarthy treated that like the Super Bowl. He had Dak Prescott out there until the late fourth quarter. Didn't even need to win that game. I believe their seeding is not going to move at all. I don't think it's really dependent on anything. So it's more than feasible for this Dolphins team to also do the same thing, right? They don't have all that much to play for. They're a young team. They really want to see what they have in a Tua Tagovailoa. So I could see myself playing some of these Dolphins today. I'm not usually a huge Tua guy either. I faded him most weeks this year because he's typically higher owned than he should be. As of right now, projected for 0.7% ownership, which is beautiful. Anytime you have a starting quarterback projected for 0.7% ownership, going to at least be a slightly intriguing number. Jalen Waddle at 4.6% expected ownership, also a relatively intriguing number there. He's only $6,300 this week as well. On the Patriots side, they absolutely need to win this game, and there is no question who this huge, let's say, bright spot of this team is, right? Who you're going to want to target when it comes to DFS, it's going to be the running backs. There's no question about it. This is a run-first team. And because they need to win this game, if they get any type of a lead here, expect them to go out and try to bleed out the clock. So for me, Brandon Bolden, an interesting target we could take a look at if you're trying to save a little bit of salary. But more aptly, a Damian Harris is in a great spot here. I have Damian Harris projected for 14.3 fantasy points right now. That's going to put him at right around 2.5x value. So not like he's jumping off of the board, but he's coming in at 0.4% ownership. So much like I said earlier, with somebody like a Tua Tagovailoa, if we're going to get him at sub 1% ownership and a chance for them to go off, it's going to be worth it in large GBPs. You got a comment down here. It looks like a mud bowl in Baltimore. Hopefully Bengals out of the win. Yeah, I hope so. It'd be cool. I think that's going to be the most intriguing fantasy game today as well. You have two teams with a lot of motivation. Tyler Huntley is running first quarterback. The Steelers team is a running first team now too. It's going to look like old-fashioned, good old hard-hitting football. Two teams that hate each other, that have a lot to play for. Unfortunately, there's probably going to be a shit ton of injuries today. You're going to see some guys go down. So if either of these teams ends up making the playoffs by some miracle or something like that, probably going to have like 5 or 6 injuries. That's just how it works with these Steelers versus Ravens games. It's a little bit of a bloodbath, like you kind of mentioned there. On the Patriots side, yeah, we already talked about Damian Harris. I probably wouldn't be looking at anyone else there. Relatively low total there. Dolphins could end up throwing in the white flag too, so you don't really like to see that. Moving on to this Saints versus Falcons game, the Saints actually have something to play for, right? It's a slim chance that they go out and make the playoffs, but at the same time, really glad that the NFL scheduled the games today as they did. Because the Saints are playing at the same time as the 49ers, they're not going to know their fate, right? So they're going to have to go out there and play their ass off. Much like the Steelers and the Ravens game going on at the same time as that Jags game, the Steelers aren't going to know if the Jags are winning or losing, so they're going to have to go out there and play their ass off. So I like the way that they scheduled this at the very least. I'm trying to keep at least some of these games somewhat relevant, because if the Jaguars were to go on and lose, the Steelers are probably not playing anyone of their starters. They're probably just benching everyone going, fuck it, we'll take a better draft pick for next year. That is not going to be the case. So much like that with the Saints here, Deonte Harris is much too cheap. He's only $3,200. He has shown a good rapport with Taysom Hill. You've seen him score over 10 fantasy points in 5 of his last 8 games, which for Deonte Harris is much better than what we saw for the beginning of the year. Taysom Hill is interesting at $6,200. He has certainly seen the price increase that he deserves ever since becoming the starter there for the Saints. But at the same time, he's getting a little bit pricey. He's only projecting right now for right around 3.2x value. And he's also relatively chalky. You're looking at a 13% ownership mark on Taysom Hill. So if he ends up making my player pool at right around the field, I'm not going to hate it, but not somebody I'm actively looking to get a ton of leverage on. Got another comment down here. New England's going to be down a few guys on their secondary as well too. That is good to know because Kyle Duggar's been an absolute stud for them. I know that they've had a few safeties get dinged up over the year, so I'm not sure if they're still on the report there as well. Let's see. We got Hightower expected to sit. Yeah, there's no reason for them to play Hightower either, just because he's so injury prone and they need him for the playoffs. And Nickelback has COVID, so you're talking me into a little bit more of that Patriots team because again, Tua, they're not sold on Tua, which I don't agree with. I think Tua is a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he's a Pro Bowl or an MVP level quarterback by any means. I don't think he's even close to that. But yeah, that could be an interesting game today. You're talking me into it a little bit even more. I was already going to get. Let's look at my Dolphins exposure ship just to give you guys an idea. I have 15% Tua right now, which is like 30x the field. I have a 20% Jalen Waddle, 15% Mike Gesicki. And yeah, that's it for the Dolphins. But you might talk me into even a little bit more because that is a very, very good point. Let's talk about some of these Saints tertiary options. Alvin Kamara should get some playing time today. They obviously have a lot to play for there. He's a huge monster usage type of guy. We haven't gotten a word on Mark Ingram, I don't believe yet. I'm going to go ahead and check the injury report, but this is a later game, so I don't expect us to get that news anytime soon. But if Mark Ingram ends up getting rolled out, you're going to look at Alvin Kamara projecting for right around 20 or even 19 fantasy points rather than something like the 16.5 that I have him at currently. Let me go ahead and double check this for you guys because sometimes we get this news early in the morning. Sometimes we don't. A bunch of guys out for the Cardinals have already been rolled out, which is good to know. Yeah, nothing on Mark Ingram yet, guys. So we're going to have to wait till a little bit later on. He has been limited in practice to this point, so would not be surprised if he's out. If he is, Alvin Kamara comes a little bit more intriguing. On the other side of that game, I'm not a huge fan of this Falcons team today because they truly have nothing to play for like a lot of other people today, but they're also just a dog shit team to begin with. I mean, their best player is Kyle Pitts. He's a rookie. That should tell you everything you need to know, everything you need to know about that offense. If I'm going to take any type of a stab on anyone here, Russell Gage is the guy that I have in my player pool. He's $5,600. He has seen an increase in production ever since you had Calvin Ridley quit on the team. So that's what you got there with Russell Gage. Let's talk about these last three games. The Jets-Bills game, game of the century, right? Going to be so competitive today, I can tell you guys. 16-point spread for the Bills. They're going to absolutely mop this team up because first off, the Jets have nothing to play for and the Bills have everything to play for. If they win and the Patriots lose today, you're going to see a flip-flop in the divisional standings there. So again, Bills have a lot to play for. The Jets, I'm probably not rostering anyone. Let's see as of right now, just to confirm. As of right now, I have 0 Jets, and I do not expect that to change. On the other side of the game, for the Buffalo Bills, I love targeting these running backs. So Devin Singletary, going to be a great option on this slate. He's definitely been priced up for the occasion there at $6,000, but has also scored more than 15 fantasy points in his last 4 games. He got 23 attempts last game, also got some targets out of the backfield, saw 22 rushes just 2 games ago. And even though he only saw 12 rushes last game, caught 6 balls. So you're really just getting a ton of usage for Devin Singletary at this point. Finally utilizing him like they should have. He's clearly the most talented running back for that team. You can go to Cole Beasley as well. He's also very much so underpriced at just $4,800. So I'm going to have a good amount of Cole Beasley on this slate as well. Just a fair price tag there. Gabriel Davis at $4,900. He's projecting for a similar type of points load, but I have him projected for twice the ownership of a Cole Beasley. So that's why I see myself going to Cole Beasley's side. At lower ownership, very similar type projection and price. Bills defense could be a little bit of a sleeper pick on the defensive side. Sure, they're a little bit expensive, but there is no denying that Zach Wilson is turnover prone, and he makes some of the dumbest plays and throws of anyone in the NFL. So on the defensive side, that is going to give the Bills defense quite a bit of upside for the slate. Now moving on to the 49ers versus the Rams game, which is one of the few games here, on top of maybe Pittsburgh versus Baltimore, that has motivation on both sides of the affair. So first and foremost, the Rams, if they win, they can improve their seeding. So they're not as motivated as some of these teams trying to actually get into the playoffs. But that is the case here for the 49ers. They need to get a win here. They need a little bit of help too, I believe, to get into the playoffs. The game is going on at the same time as that Saints game. I believe if they win and the Saints win, they still get in. But it's great that those games are going on at the same time. It's going to make sure that we still have the motivation for both of these teams here. So for the 49ers side of things, Elijah Mitchell, an intriguing option. He looked great last week. He looked great the week before that as well. When he was back in there in week 13, week 12, he scored 30 fantasy points. So when this guy's been active, when he's been getting carries for this 49ers team, has been absolutely smashing. In fact, as a starter for this team, only has 2 performances of less than 17 fantasy points, and that includes a 13-point performance and a 9-point performance. So this isn't somebody who, when he's starting, is going out there and completely flopping. He's at the very least giving you some type of a consistent return. And of course, we've already seen that 30-plus point upside flashed. So like this matchup here against this Rams defense, if they have any type of a susceptibility on the defensive side, it is against opposing rushing attacks. Obviously Jalen Ramsey, one of the best secondaries in terms of their pass rush as well. Just really like the rushing attack for this 49ers side. So Elijah Mitchell going to be a core play for me on this slate. For the Rams, not completely sold. We see them for all 4 quarters, right? There's a chance that we see them only play them for 3-4 quarters, especially if they get ahead. Could see Matthew Stafford hitting the bench there, but he is going to be in my player pool. He's only projected for 6% ownership right now. I have 25% Matthew Stafford. I have plenty of Tyler Higbee at his price tag. Great price tag there at $4,000. I have some Sony Michel at $6,000. I also think that's a very fair price tag. And Van Jefferson, believe it or not, my #1 exposed play on this team. I have him projected for 14 fantasy points. He's somebody who, even if they go out and get way ahead in this game, even if they decide the rest of their starters, Van Jefferson Jr. is going to play for them. He's going to see usage in both units. And much like a Kenneth Gainwell last night, who, of course, he ended up being the starter because Boston Scott and Jordan Howard were both rolled out. But Gainwell was somebody I wanted to target regardless of those players because he was going to see targets out of the backfield as a wide receiver with that first unit. And if they decided to bench Scott and Howard at halftime and go to that second unit, Gainwell was going to lead that unit. So very similar situation for Van Jefferson Jr. He will be serving as the number 3 wide receiver role with this first unit and the number 1 wide receiver with their second unit. So very interesting option there because he has a relatively high floor. If you're playing cash, I think Van Jefferson Jr. is one of the best plays on the slate. Now moving on to the last game of the day. So I believe this is game 13 here. First off, Seattle Seahawks versus the Arizona Cardinals. Seahawks have nothing to play for. Russell Wilson likely gone after this year. At least that's what I think. I do expect him to go to another team. Not likely to see very much of him here. If you see him play 3-4 quarters, I don't expect them to be completely engaged with this game. If there's anybody here that has incentive, it is going to be a Tyler Lockett, though, which I cannot take credit for this. I was not the one who found this, but Tyler Lockett, if he scores 2 touchdowns today, gets a $1.2 million bonus, which is much more sizable than some of the other incentives we see out there today. You know, there's going to be some guys, if they get 115 rushing yards, they're going to get like 100K or something like that. 1.2 mil is a little bit more of a big deal. So Tyler Lockett for sure going to see some extra red zone usage. He's definitely going to have been asking Russell Wilson for that during this week. And if anybody has earned that right, it's Tyler Lockett. He's clearly the number 1 wide receiver on this team. At least while DK Metcalf is dealing with injury, he's not been as explosive. And Tyler Lockett getting a lot more looks on third down. So that's usually how I try to differentiate some of these wide receivers on teams is who's getting targeted more on third down. That's really where you can see the confidence that a quarterback has in their wide receiver. Much like a Hunter Renfrow, that's really where you knew Renfrow was going to be a stud wide receiver. It's because of how much Derek Carr relied on him on third down. When you see those type of numbers, that is extremely indicative of, first off, a player's potential, but second off, production to come in the future. So really do like going to a Tyler Lockett there. If anyone for the Seahawks team, though, outside of a Tyler Lockett, not all that much I have exposure to. Now, on this Arizona side, though, completely different story. This is going to be the chalk for today. You're going to see a lot of people go to a James Conner because Chase Edmonds is out. You're going to see a lot of people play Zach Ertz, Christian Kirk, Kyler Murray, because they have so much to play for here. So I do expect this to be one of the better games to target here, especially because you can use an Arizona stack, maybe run it back with a Tyler Lockett. Hopefully he gets to that incentive mark and make a pretty solid lineup. So I do have right now 80% exposure to a James Conner. I have 40% Kyler Murray as of right now. Murray is the highest owned quarterback, actually second highest owned quarterback on the slate behind a Tyler Huntley. But that is definitely well warranted there. What we'll do now, if there's not any questions down in the chat, is I want to go ahead and just go through my top exposed players. And we'll go ahead and get out of here, let you guys make your lineups and whatnot. But my highest owned player on the slate right now is James Conner. They're 80%. I have 50% the Browns defense. So we already talked about how Bengals have nothing to play for. They're already playing a backup quarterback. The Browns are a feisty bunch. They're not going to back down as much as they would like to. They're going to go out there and play hard. So I do like the Browns defense. Deonte Harris, I have 35% of right now. Only $3,200 for that Saints team that still has a lot to play for. I have 35% Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz also in a highly motivated matchup against that Seahawks team. I have 80% Jonathan Taylor, which I don't think that should surprise any of you guys. Jonathan Taylor in a very high motivation spot against that Jaguars team and has been arguably the best fantasy player in all of the NFL to begin with. Tyler Huntley, I have plenty of Tyler Huntley, 20% right now. And something I didn't expect to see in my pool, I'm going to keep it here. I'm still going to make adjustments to this pool as we get off stream here, but I have 35% Justin Jefferson right now, and I expect to keep that. I did expect him to get some rest today, but him tweeting that he really wants to beat that Randy Moss record shows that he's probably bargaining for some playing time today. So I'd be willing to go to a Justin Jefferson. A few other guys that I have some ownership to that are being completely neglected by the field. There's a few of them to be sure. First and foremost, a Nelson Aguilar. He's playing for the New England Patriots. He's been getting the number 2 wide receiver snaps for this team. And of course, they need to go out there and torch this Dolphins team. So really low owned, really cheap price tag there at $3,400. Nelson Aguilar could be a decent source of a little bit of leverage. A few other guys that are low owned that I'm going to, Zach Pascal for the Colts team. I know we talked before how they also really need to win this game. Zach Pascal, the number 3 wide receiver over there, really big play upside, even more so than a Michael Pittman Jr. or a T.Y. Hilton. If anybody's going to take an 80-yard touchdown to the house, it's going to be one of those 2 guys. And let's finish it up with one more leverage play for today's slate. Let's see. Who do I have a ton of ownership on that's super low owned? Cardinals defense, actually. I want to go ahead and mention them. So against that Seahawks team that doesn't have all that much motivation, they've been a solid fantasy defense to this point of the year as well. Could definitely see myself going their way at just $2,700. You're getting a lot of flexibility there with their price tag, also in terms of their ownership. That's all I've got for you guys today. Devin Scott says, good stream, good luck. Thank you, appreciate that. Good luck to all of you guys out there. If you have any questions and you're watching this on replay, feel free to throw them down in the chat, and I'll get back to you guys as soon as possible. Good luck with anybody out there playing golf today. I have a hell of a sweat on my hands right now, so we're probably going to be watching a little bit more golf than football today. But of course, good luck with your football lineups. Good luck with Sunday Night Football tonight. If you guys are part of the Patreon, I will have projections for you for the Sunday Night Football tonight. Not likely to have a live stream. I was considering it, but with golf going on, with football going on at the same time, not as likely to be going over on that side today. But you'll at least have the projections up on Patreon. And Max says, before we hop on out of here, do you like Lockett or McLaurin? Lockett, and it's not particularly close to me. Because of that 2-touchdown incentive that Lockett has, could end up being one of the best plays on the slate. So that's how I'd be going with there. McLaurin, though, really high upside play. If you ended up going that way, couldn't blame you. But good luck, guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and let's get this cash.